So in today's episode of the Health Collective podcast, we're talking with Celia Barsby, a creative visionary and what I would call an emotional gardener. She helps women create safe space for seeking inner joy and connection, and essentially looks at aiding women in transitioning through limitations that they've held onto their entire life. We are all going through different states of transition, and some of the ones that we speak about in today's episode are menopause, divorce, loss of a loved one. So if any of these aspects are afflicting you, or even if it's transition through career, looking at resigning, changing the way that you work and the business that you're in, then this is the episode for you to understand how to make those transitions without limitation, without fear, and doing it in a way that you really water your own emotional garden. Welcome to everybody here at the Health Collective podcast. It's great to have you all listening. And as I've already mentioned, we have Celia with us today, and we are going to take a little wander down a garden path together. Now, before we get to the end of it and understand what that garden path really looks like, Celia, could you give us a bit of an understanding of what sparked your journey down this path? What maybe are some of the contextual events or transitions that happened in your life that maybe women listening to this could relate to as well?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So I talk about your deepest wound is your greatest medicine, and often that's what we experience in those transitions. So it's those pivotal moments when you go, my life is never going to be the same again. That's what we experience in that transition. And that can be good transition. You know, we have experiences of, oh, this is amazing. But often where we experience the greatest transformation is when those pivotal moments make you go, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through this? And for me, that began really when I was 10 and I experienced childhood bereavement. Now, back in the day when I was 10, nobody thought about counselling or, talking to a 10-year-old about what she just experienced in the loss of her father. And I lost my nana as well within 21 weeks. So a massive, massive transition. My life changed, was turned upside down. Life was never going to be the same again. It was years before I was able to work with what had happened in that moment. Because what happens when we experience a trauma like that, because again, it was a good few years before I even recognized that as trauma. You go, oh, that's what I experienced. We then create filters. That is how we see our life moving forward. So for me, those filters were, I was an only child, so it was all my fault. I now had to look after my mum. She was my responsibility. And the big one was the people you love will leave you. Now, I then take every relationship that I come to, I now see through that clouded, distorted filter. So you can see how, the first person that showed any interest in me was, oh yeah, oh my goodness, I'm craving security. And so jump into the first relationship and got, I was brought up that, you go to school, you get some grades, possibly university, then you get married and you have children, and that's what you do. And I lived out that story. And so, my next transition was 23 years later, when that relationship was, I wasn't the same person. I finally was able to look at what had happened to me, of what I had experienced, because things don't happen to us, they happen for a reason. So I looked at what I'd experienced and I moved through that trauma. We talk briefly about, it is a whole body experience. It's not just physical, it's mind, body, soul. And I came out of that healing a different person. And so I then experienced another transition, which was moving through divorce after 23 years of marriage. And my next transition really was the realization that what I have experienced and the tools I've picked up along, while I've been gardening for all of these years, I've picked up a lot of tools and I've learned how to use them. And that is my medicine. That is my deepest wound is my greatest medicine. That's what I bring to women moving through those transition periods. I lost my mum. I then went, oh, I'm not supposed to be working in this full-time job. I get to create the space to do my work. So that is, some of the markers on my journey.
There's probably a lot in there that women can relate to in terms of loss, changes, and even at such a young age, at 10, a shift in identity. Those filters are now become sort of calcified to who you feel you need to be. And as you then moved through life on this story, and that's how you sort of described it, and that traditional story is probably one that most of the women listening to this have either been through or are still in, and that is that thing, but it does create almost a structured destiny. It's almost that certain aspects of our life are no longer ours because it's determined by a societal belief that these are the steps that you take. So at what stage did you become aware that maybe you were in a story that you hadn't chosen to write?
I talk about the inner rebel who pops up, occasionally. And I can, I can look back at my life and go, oh, that was that was her. That was this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this like this anymore. And she wasn't quite strong enough. She had to develop her inner muscles, the inner strength that was required to say, okay, no, the rebel does things differently. Even that word rebel has a slightly, society goes, oh, not allowed to be a rebel, especially if you're a woman, and we live that out. And of course we are, I feel really passionate about women now who are saying, no, I know this is important because I'm getting chills all up and down my body. We are going to do things differently. We are clearing generations of wounded stories for women where, this is what we expected. And hundreds of years worth of story that women have lived through and lived out. I think when, what was that moment that I knew? I think because I am a lady of a certain age, and because actually I moved through menopause relatively unscathed. I was deeply blessed. I didn't have masses of symptoms, and there was that moment when I listened to a series actually, and somebody talked about, because I was always taught, you're going to go through the change, dun, 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 the dun, dun, dun. It's that Jaws music. You're, oh my goodness, this is going to be horrendous. Well, of course, if you go into any experience saying this is going to be horrendous, that's usually what we manifest. And this lady talked about the hot flushes we talk about in this country, but, heat surges. And she said, when we are of a fertile age, all of our energy goes to the earth. We bleed, that goes to the earth. Yeah, there's that downward energy movement. What happens at menopause when that stops is we start receiving that energy from Mother Earth, and that is the rising. So every time I felt that, I went, whoa, this is amazing. Mother Earth is giving this to me. Now that completely shifts the story from, oh, I'm having, I mustn't be seen to be experiencing that. So that was pivotal. That was pivotal for me in seeing a story through a completely different perspective.
Mm.
And then there came the moment when, so I was working in education, supporting young people to find the career, the job that would light them up. What do you want to do for the rest of your life? And I used to joke in the sessions, one day I will find, I'm still looking for my dream job, and they all say, well, she's way too old to be thinking about a new job. And there came a moment, I was having my morning practice, my meditation, I write every morning, and there was that real sense of, well, now is the time that you get to do things differently. So I went upstairs and I said to my hubby, I said, I'm not going to retire. I'm not going to resign today. I'm not going to retire because I think, I've created a new life. I'm not going to resign today. And he went, okay, but because he sensed that I said, but I am going to resign after Christmas because I wanted to see these young people through to a pivotal moment for them, which was the end of January. And so that's what I did. And a real sense of, I talk about garden paths of going, okay, I can see this path and I can see one step on this path. And then there's a lot of undergrowth and I get to clear the path, I get to clear the space. And I think for me, in those moments of transition, of the big change in our life, that's one of the biggest challenges. We can't see what's coming. The path disappears around the corner. It's all, cover. There's a Sleeping Beauty moment then of, there's too much undergrowth and hedges and I can't see. And having the deep trust, the faith that, if this is a calling, this is what's happened, this is what you're moving through, and we trust that that is for our highest good, because we don't see the bigger picture. So I'm not sure if I answered your question there. As I say, we wander in my garden.
That's absolutely fine. I love gardens with various different paths, and you never know where you're going to end up. So for a lot of the people listening, a lot of people in general, that societal story, and there is a traditional story for men as well. We can't discount that. There is aspect of what male, female roles and energy mean. There is, I suppose, you used it off air, a phrase that was the 3D world. And 3D world, I guess the more common phraseology for that would be material. The house, the finances, sort of having the relationship, the 2.3 children, whatever it might be. Within that as well, there is also norms in the sense of, and there is a point to this question, in the sense of you cover your grays, you have traditional looks, you wear, traditional kind of clothing, you do certain things that mean that you fit in. Because obviously fitting in is a sort of a survival instinct that we learn very quickly, and then we want to get to the top of our herd, but we want to be part of the herd. Now, for those listening rather than watching, Celia is probably not what you would say the traditional look is, for the people listening. So maybe you could give us a description of maybe what I'm talking about, but also what changed in you, or how did you get over the limitation of, I suppose, for want of a better word, embarrassment, which tends to be the biggest limitation for most people to make a transition from norm to outside the norm. What helped you create that change and move through that limitation of self-judgment, sort of self-criticism, embarrassment? How did you move through that? And yeah, maybe for those who are listening, describe to them what I'm sort of talking about.
Okay, so I am, as I said, a woman of a I'm going to tell you, on air, I'm going to disclose that I'm 63. Okay, so I am of an age of, should. Here, let's go down the should route. I should be thinking about retirement. I should be responsible. And even as I'm talking, all of the limiting beliefs, my inner critic, my voice of fear, stands there, usually by my side, very creative. So if you're creative, fear and creativity go hand in hand. Okay, so fear is sort of somewhere over here with a clipboard telling me all the things that I shouldn't do. But actually, fear just checks that you have everything you need. That's a little. I'll drop that one in there. So yeah, I have purple hair. I live in dungarees. I've got my posh dungarees on today rather than the working dungarees. But I live in dungarees. So here's the thing about wanting to fit in. At the age of 10, I didn't fit in. At the age of 10, I was the only child in school. And this is an interesting reflection on society, but I was the only child in school who didn't have two parents living at home together. I only had my mum. So and I think, this was the training ground to say, you're not going to fit in. You are called to be I talk about a trailblazer. I am leading the way for women, for my, the women that are, I actually think about it as ancestors as well. My ancestors are before me and behind me. But I am saying, I am not going to be the same. And you're right, the fitting in is, and I work with this all the time of going, wouldn't it be nice just to, be retired and or somebody, I just want to work for somebody else, and wasn't it much? And you go, no, it really wasn't, because I was in quite a toxic work situation. So not fitting in is not the norm, but I wasn't, that's what I experienced way back when, that you go, this is what it feels like to not fit in. And the discovery that there was something that my peers saw the leader in me. They, and again, it was something I resisted. I went, oh, no, got to stay small, got to keep my head below the parapet, don't make a fuss, don't be seen. And, something has shifted. Look, it's no, I get to be seen because of the work that I have to do. There's the passion that if something I have discovered in my garden about this is how you can shape your garden, how you can create that garden for yourself. I talk about that inner garden. This is your soul garden. This is what you get to design. You get to design and create your own life. Now that's not being normal. That I said to you this before you start, I feel like today I'm back to normal, or what passes for normal in my house. This is how we do things, and we do things differently. So self-worth, have we worked through? Oh yes, that was, that's huge, because you're absolutely right. Men, I think there's a really interesting shift, between masculine and feminine energies, because we are both. And men are discovering their feminine side and their creativity and their nurturing and their caring, and they are learning that they can do things differently. So there's this huge, massive shift going on for everybody, and you go, that for me is exciting. That, you know, we get to be who we are. You know, I talk about, I mean, you know, my strap line is, you know, discover your authentic all the way through. This is me. What you see on the outside is what I am in the inside. This is just a reflection, you know, complete with the purple hair and the, you know, the dungarees and garden party. Authentic, rebellious, because we're going, I'm not going to do things the same way that they've always been done, and a little bit quirky. And quirky's good. Quirky's playful. You know, we connect with our inner child again. And I was reminded of that this morning in my own work of, you know, we haven't had a play. What, you know, let's get to play today. And this conversation is part of my play. This is where we get to hang out with, you know, with you and all your listeners, and going, you know, come on to my garden, come and play. I used to love that. I used to say to my friends, come and play in my garden. And that's what we're here to do.
The word should is an interesting one. It's something that my regular listeners and clients will be aware of, that I always say that we should all over ourselves.
Yes, I love that phrase.
And it's one of those moments where it's, rather than saying we should, it's taking ownership of what we truly want. And I think a lot of people spend their life afraid of genuinely reaching for what they want. And I'd love to sort of to look at, as a finish to the episode, of dealing with that fear, because what you will hear today from most women are words like stressed or fraught or pressured. And we essentially use these. Frustrated is another word, which is just a politically correct word for I'm angry. But as women, being angry is not acceptable. Being stressed is acceptable. Being afraid isn't. But stress and pressure and tension and overwhelm are just politically correct ways of saying I'm afraid. Yes. And one of the, and I feel that this is probably a take that you also maybe have in a similar way to myself. Fear is a messenger. It's helping us if only we can listen. So when women are limited, and it can be a very paralytic limitation, when they are in those moments of stress, paralysis, overwhelm, tension, essentially fear. Yeah. How do they move through that? Because when you're in it, it's very hard to know how to get out of it. But that was one of the things that you mentioned, that it's almost like there's fear with a clipboard helping you. So how could you maybe guide other women to create that movement and flow through the fear rather than being paralyzed by it?
I think, you know, I love your hand movements there, and those of you who are listening will have missed the hand movement. And the hand movements are moving through, you know, put your hand, do it now, put your hands from, you know, on the left and move through to the right. And just, you know, just doing that creates movement. When we create movement in our body, we create movement in our thoughts. And you go, yeah, we get to play. This is why lots of women like to dance, because you're creating that movement. So there was a couple of pieces there that I want to pick up on. I talk about celebrate your wins. That, and from a place of, you know, I had a time in my life when my to-do list was, I had 3 things to do. 1 was get out of bed, 2 was get dressed, and 3 was go out and feed the birds. And if I managed all 3 in a day, I had a good day, because I was in that place of overwhelm, depression, anxiety, and I love that you use those societally, politically correct words. Whatever you are experiencing, ultimately you are in a place that you don't want to be. But when I was able to say, yeah, whoa, go me, I got out of bed today and I got dressed, and there's a piece here about I got out of bed, I created movement. I got dressed, there was self-care. I fed the birds, I was in service. What can I do for somebody else? I fed the birds. And that was huge. And I didn't realize the enormity at the time, other than I knew that if I did those 3 things, I'd had a good day. Mm-hmm. So celebrate your wins. And, it doesn't, your big wins, little wins, what happens, I'm not going to go into I'm not a scientist, but I know that when you tick something off your list, you get a little burst of feel-good hormones, because you have a sense of achievement. So you write down, I got out, get out of bed, tick. That is sense of achievement. Self-care, sense of, those feel-good hormones. So that's why it works. And it's just bringing it to a level of going, I can do this today. And I still do I still have moments of overwhelm? Yes, I do. I just have better tools now. I actually wrote down, I was feeling it the other week, and I went, why? I have one of those moments. What on earth is going on? I'm very British. What on earth is going on? You can translate that to whatever you like. But oh my goodness, what is going on? So I wrote it all down, and I looked at it and I thought, you haven't written down one thing that you could tick off. There's nothing on here that is going to create movement. You go, right, let's just reframe this and go, well, why am I was slightly overwhelmed with the number of crochet projects. I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but I love crochet. I love starting new things, not very good at finishing things. And they went, well, you know what? Well, how about you just focus on one thing? So that is a tool. Let's go drop back to the gardening analogy. Sometimes our garden is so overwhelming, we don't know where to start. Sometimes our life is so overwhelming, you go, oh, I just don't know where to start. That was my page. I don't know where to start. I've got all of this stuff. And you go, okay, so you start with one thing. You pull out one weed. Sort out. I like talking about garden pots. Maybe it's time to tip out a pot and have a look. Is there anything of value in that pot? Do I want to keep anything? Or is it actually all weed? And then you go, okay, I'll keep that bit. And it's that one thing that creates the movement. Okay. I also wanted to touch on sovereignty. Is one of my keys that I talk about. And sovereignty is that boundary, creating our safe boundaries for ourselves, but also surrounding ourselves with people who can support us and that we can go to and go, I'm having such a tough time. And not that they are going to sort it out for you, but they can witness you and go, yeah, sometimes you just need a hug. And that can be a virtual hug.
Absolutely. Well, what a beautiful way to finish on. Virtual hugs to everyone watching. And everyone.
Yes.
I think that's a fantastic, as Jeremy Clarkson would put it, what a bombshell to finish up the show on. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, Celia, and listening to your journey and your unique perspective on transitions and how they work, and especially what you said about the menopause, I think was a fantastic reframing of a very challenging stage of life for most of the women listening. So that just leaves me to say to Celia, thank you so much. For everyone listening, if you would like some details of how to get in contact with Celia, that will be in the podcast description. So have a little look and check her out. And just another massive thank you to all of you for listening. And I hope you've garnered some wonderful buds and seeds and blooms from today's episode. And I look forward to seeing you all on the next one. So from myself and Celia, have a fabulous day.
Yeah.